Thank you very much. Minister of the Environment and Food, Espen Lunde Larsen. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow panelists, I think there was a great example of partnerships. It's a great pleasure to be here today and to actually see so many people and so many minds on better food for more people. The other day my daughter went to school and she was asked, what does your father do? And she said, my father makes coffee in the office. And that essentially is what I do. So I represent, I give an industry perspective on food loss and waste. I think it's great to have a forum like this, and I think it's also very much due to the social development goals that we now have a common goal and a common purpose. And as you know, 12.3 of the social development goals aims to halve food waste by 2030. Or maybe we should put this more positively. Maybe we should say, let's try and utilize all the food that we are producing, and let's try and recognize all the efforts that the total value chain makes to produce this food. Food waste, as we know, is a huge challenge, and a few numbers have already been mentioned. Food waste for us is much more than just wasting food. It means wasting energy, it means wasting water, it means wasting land, it means wasting nutrients, it means wasting workforce. And therefore, there's an opportunity for all to do better and to better utilize the resources that we have at our disposition. To adequately feed 10 billion people by 2050, the world needs to produce 60% more food. And if we don't take the first opportunity to better use what we are already producing, that will be a massive challenge. Just to give you a few numbers, I mean, the food that is being lost or is not being utilized at the moment represents an area size of the food that is being produced at an area size of China. 1/3 of food is wasted from farm to fork. And the first time I heard that, coming from the food industry, that was a figure that I found very hard to believe, but it's unfortunately true. 1.3 billion tons, which is something our mind can't even get to. 1.3 billion tons of food. 3.3 billion tons of greenhouse gas emission that comes from this food that is not being utilized. That would make food waste the third biggest country in greenhouse gas emission, in the greenhouse gas emission ranking. 270 trillion liters of water are wasted because of food waste. That is 3 times Lake Geneva, and if you have ever tried to swim that is a hell of a lot of water. That represents $1 trillion of value. So the stakes are big, and I think with every big stake, the challenge is how do we make this and bring this down to manageable bite-sized pieces, so we can start addressing the challenge that we all have, which is to halve food waste by 2030. All of us means the governments, the authorities, the NGOs, the farmers, the producers, the retailers, also the consumers, scientists, and many more. And that's why I think a forum like this is so important. None of us hold the key to the answer individually. For Nestlé, partnerships are very important. And if I take the first partnership that we have is the Consumer Goods Forum, where we have united all the manufacturers and all the retailers, 400 in total, of food produced. And the Consumer Goods Forum last year has made a commitment to, in our own environment, in manufacturing and in retailing, to halve food waste 5 years earlier than the SDA. So we want to halve this by 2025. Now, in order to do so, we actually had to take some very pragmatic and sometimes maybe a little bit boring steps. And I think it's important to look at that. We can talk big numbers, we can set big goals, but the first step is the road to what we want to achieve. And in that sense, the Food Loss and Waste Accounting and Reporting Standard, FLW standard, that is here, that Craig has many more copies of. He's sitting there in the back of the room. This was developed together with WRI, with many partners in partnership. And it's important that if we want to reduce food waste, that we first and foremost account and that we agree together what is food waste. And this standard does that and sets a global standard for everybody to account for this in the same measure. It's only when we measure we can manage. And I think it is very important that we all commit to actually accounting for food waste as this standard. There is a very good precedent of standards that were also developed by WRI, the Green Gas Accounting and Reporting Standard, and we all know that that has significantly furthered the discussion on greenhouse emissions. It also highlighted a few weaknesses in the system, which then allow for the pooling of resources to jointly prioritize and put our efforts on what matters most. And we hope very much that the food loss and waste standard will have similar reach and similar effects. Nestlé strongly encourages every government, every authority, every NGO, every company, every retailer and every farmer in all parts of the food chain to use the FLW standard. Tracking for us as a company is part of what we're doing. That is part of business. We're tracking every aspect of our business, and we're tracking in very detailed the environmental impact, the performance, the waste that we are producing, and that is in order to reduce these elements. Food waste and food loss has actually been at the origin of the food industry. In 1929, the Brazilian government had a significant overcrop of coffee beans and asked Nestlé on one side to deploy its science and technology to find a better way of conserving coffee, and on the other side to deploy its marketing and communication skill to drive more coffee consumption. What happened afterwards is history. Created a big brand, created Brazil that is now one of the biggest coffee producers in the world, and created tons of satisfied consumers that consume coffee in the most efficient way. So we are very happy in this forum to share what we have done, to learn from what you have done, to share practices, to come up with best practices, to account for food waste, to report for food waste, to come up with these best practices and together get much closer to the goal that we have set together in 2030. I think it's also very nice to be in Denmark, because as fast as food waste is concerned, Denmark is a front runner. Selina is here in front. She's leading Stop Wasting Food movement, but I think more than just this title, she is the driver and the engine about propagating the necessity of food waste in the world. And we're very happy to get to know each other, and we're very happy to partner and see how can we help each other to eliminate and get closer to this goal. With ongoing collaboration and commitment, I'm sure that we can turn the tide, that we can better utilize all the elements in the value chain. Those who measure waste will better manage it, and therefore the standard is important for a first step. Let's get started. To me, it's better food, more people, better utilized, and I'm looking forward to discuss this with all of you in the coming sessions. Thank you.